Welcome to another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson. I am the founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. You can learn more about it at teachthegeek.com. Again, that is teachthegeek.com. Today, my guest is Patrick Akil. He is a software engineer and host of the Beyond Coding podcast. He got a degree in information studies. I must admit, I do not know what that is, but I'm really curious to find out. So I'm also interested to learn more about what drew him to software engineering and the motivation for starting his podcast. And his views on public speaking will definitely be of interest too. Welcome to Teach the Geek interviews, Patrick.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So first things first, I mentioned I have no clue what information studies is. What is it and what motivated you to study it?
Yeah, so coming out of high school, I probably like a lot of people, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something technical, but I didn't have a lot of the essentials throughout high school to go really in depth with regards to tech. But information studies is kind of on the line between business as well as, well, we'll just call it tech, I guess. They define it as you're the bridge between the business people and the technical people, which sounds really broad. So not knowing what I actually wanted to do, that's what I chose because I thought through that I would have a better idea of what I actually wanted to do down the road.
Well, that's a really good reason to pick what you picked. I used to lie about why I picked what I picked because it really wasn't something I picked. I came out of high school not really knowing what I wanted to do, and my father was the one who said I should become an engineer. He's never been an engineer himself. I have no clue even why he suggested engineering. I suspect it's because of the stability typically of the field, and I just did it, and luckily it worked out okay, and
Yeah.
because I ended up working as one and didn't completely hate it. So thank you, Dad. I guess if you're listening.
Good stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so when it comes to the work that you ended up doing with the degree in information studies, what type of work was that?
Yeah, so when I actually got the bachelor's, sadly enough, I still didn't quite know what I wanted to do. The technical side always drew me, though, more so than the business side. So I knew of some roles that were out there. Software engineering was one of them. Business analytics was on the opposite side, but I still didn't know what I wanted to do. So I looked around and applied actually a lot to a lot of jobs, not because I actually wanted those jobs, but because I wanted better insights in what I would be doing when I actually started. And I was really bad at interviewing. I was really bad at the interview process. They tell me about yourselves. They tell me about the times. Like I was really bad at that. And for me, like I did so much research. I did so much like theoretical knowledge that I was like, okay, the only way to get better at this for me personally is to practice. And there's only one way to practice interviewing. It's by actually doing a lot of interviews. So that's when I did. And then I came across a company where it was a holding company. So multiple companies came together and formed this holding. And it was a technical operations role because they came together as a holding. A lot of the roles were kind of newly defined and they didn't know exactly what you would end up doing. I would be responsible for applications. But if I wanted to know more about infrastructure, network, storage, databases, everything with regards to operations, I could do so through that role. And because it wasn't a holding, I thought the landscape would be really broad. So I thought it'd be a good place to start and again figure out what I wanted to do in the on the long term.
Nice. You know, I remember when I came out of school and had to get a job, I wasn't that great at interviewing either. And frankly, even after that job, applying for another job, and the job after that wasn't that great at it either.
Yeah,
I've never been great at interviewing. Maybe that's why I don't work for anybody now, so I don't have to go through the whole interview process. I just remember it being so stressful, and they ask you these questions: "What's your greatest weakness?" Like I'm going to tell you, so you use it against me.
that's kind of putting yourself at a vulnerable position. Yeah,
Yeah, like why the hell would I do that? But people still think to ask that question. Or the question, where do you see yourself in 5 years? How the hell do I know?
I don't know
I'm trying to get this
exactly.
job,
Do
man.
you know? Yeah, exactly.
Like these stupid questions. But people just ask them because I was asked that question when I interviewed, and the person that interviewed me was asked that question. So they continue asking these type of questions. But I mean, do they really matter in the grand scheme of things? I mean, what are you gonna say? 5 years? I mean, I'm trying to get this job now, man. We're 5 years when we get to 5 years. I mean, and not only that, but
Exactly.
people's minds change. So, but they say they ask that question because it shows that you are able to plan. So maybe that's the reason you asked the question. But I mean, it's still, I mean, if you're asking for certainties in 5 years, you're not going to get them. But you might get a very good answer for the people who interview well. And not only that, I remember one guy I used to work with. He interviewed really well, but he was a
Hmm.
terrible worker. Oh man, he
Okay.
was the worst. But everyone said during the interview process he's wonderful. But then he
Nice.
actually starts working, and it's just like, oh man, we need to get rid of this guy.
Yeah,
But
that's really sad. He got really good at interviews. That's the
yeah,
only thing though,
and then I was the
sadly.
one that was I sucked at interviews, but I was a pretty good worker. At least I have never heard of people saying that I needed to be let go or I need to get rid of. But the other
Yeah.
guy, oh yeah, you hear it all the time. But the interviews well, so go figure. So I
Yeah.
mentioned in the intro that you're a software engineer. What eventually brought you to software engineering?
Yeah, yeah. So just continuing on the story, I joined in the role of technical operations manager. They call it manager, even though I'm not really managing people. More so the applications. And a lot of the times, I had a problem, but I wasn't actually responsible for fixing it. I experienced the problem. That's what you do from an operations side. But then you involve the people that are responsible for fixing it, which are the software engineers. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. If it's my responsibility when it's in production, then why can I also not be responsible for changing the things that then still go into production? Like it didn't, that disconnect to me didn't make any sense. I went online and I saw this whole thing about DevOps, developers, and operations coming together in the same role, right? And sharing that end responsibility from the creation process to when it goes into the hands of the user on the operation side, and then being responsible when it hits production as well, and everything that goes in between. And I was like, yeah, this totally makes sense to me. This is what I want. I went to my manager and I said, this is what I want. I had tried database management and I had learned about infrastructure a bit more. And I said, this is the next thing, right? Because those things, I experienced those things, and those were not necessarily it for me. I had learned that throughout, which is really nice because learning what you don't want is also moving you towards what you do want, which is really good. And then software engineering was the next thing. Luckily, my manager knew exactly who to connect me with. He was also new, so he got this kind of role defined for me. He said, "This is really where we need you, where it's also a position you can fill." It was an enterprise service bus developer. I don't know exactly what they do. I still don't know because there wasn't any work in there. It was just a role I fulfilled. And then within 1 week, the guy that was doing most of the knowledge transfer to me was almost nowhere to be found. He was only there for 2 days a week. So I went back to my manager and said, this is not going to work. Okay. I want to do software engineering. This guy is not there. I have no clue what I want to do. I have no clue how to get there. I have no guidance. This is not what I signed up for. And then he said, okay, we have this team and they're responsible for the e-commerce part of our company. There's a lot of consultants. They're quite expensive. They're all going to go at some point. And I want to form an internal team that can kind of take over from them, that can be responsible and deliver that continuity that we actually want from a software development point of view, but also from the operations side, because they do both right now. And I was like, that's it. That's it. And they knew. I got a seat at the table. They knew, okay, Patrick is the guy that's going to take over from you guys. You guys can leave on to your next assignment. So do everything you can with regards to knowledge transfer to get Patrick up to speed. I mean, it was Patrick plus obviously some other people that were involved earlier than me. But that was their job. So then finally I got the ball rolling, and it was, man, it's quite daunting actually starting out in software engineering. I don't say I'm self-taught because I got a lot of guidance throughout my career, and there were some adjacencies in my university path as well. But when I put up my first pull request, I was quite proud of that. We did that in a pair programming sense. I was like, okay, I kind of get the concepts. I kind of get what we actually did. Maybe not how we did it, but especially what we did. And then I got like 40 remarks on this first pull request, and I was like, okay, these guys are legit. And I didn't think about any of those points they mentioned. It was an uphill battle. I saw a huge uphill battle for myself, but because this was what I wanted to do, that was also very motivating. That was also for me just the start of how I got the ball rolling. It was very cool.
Nice. I really like the part when you said that when during this whole journey you figured out the things that you didn't want to do, and
Yeah.
that helped move you towards the things you did like to do. But the potential problem you run into there is you have experience in all the things you don't like to do. So if you were to go into an interview, they'll see all the things that you don't like to do, and they'll think, we're going to put him in that role because this is the experience he has. But you have to tell them, no, 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 don't put me there.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
not
like
what I
doing those
want.
things.
I already did that. No.
I hated that. Don't put me
Yeah.
there. I want to do this other thing. It's like, but you don't have experience in that other thing. But I can learn, man. Just like I learned the
Yeah.
stuff over here that I got experience in, I can learn this other stuff. Then I can have experience in that. So in my next role, if they want to put me there, I'll go, no problem, because I actually like doing that part.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's great. All right. Patrick, I want to tell you the reason that I started this whole podcast in the first place. And
Mm.
it had to do with my own struggles giving presentations in front of management. And I eventually saw the benefit of it when my project was canceled. And I thought that I was going to be out of a job. Luckily, I was just moved on to other projects. But that definitely was the wake up call to let me know that perhaps giving these presentations in front of people might be something I want to get better at. When did you realize that presenting in front of people could be something of benefit to you?
Yeah. Throughout my educational journey, I always admired people that could give a good presentation. And I always thought this is not for me. I get really anxious standing in front of people, presenting something, even if I'm new in a team, right? And we're doing these introduction rounds of who are you? Tell me a little bit about yourself and what are you doing in this project or what is your role? And I get nervous, like my heart starts beating a bit faster. But I've learned to cope with it. So I always saw the value initially. I love people that are able to present, able to just take an audience with them, tell a story, and at the end actually get what they want result wise, get across what they want communication wise. I've always admired that, but I never thought it would be for me. And now, since I've done a lot more communication, I've done a bit more public speaking, and I've done a lot more podcasting. I'm nowhere near the amount of podcasts you've put out, but we're getting there. We're getting there slowly. I've gotten more comfortable in speaking publicly. Obviously, podcasting is not as public and it's not as confronting as standing in front of an audience. But I have stood on stage for like the biggest stage I've had were 600 people. And I wasn't speaking on a technical side. I was hosting the whole thing. So I was making sure that everything went smoothly and I cracked jokes in between and I really found my comfort zone throughout that. Um, so yeah, I kind of forgot what your initial question was, but I always saw value in that.
Yeah, that sometimes happens to me. I mean, I get the question and I just go off on something again. It's like, what was the question again? But what I
Yeah, I'm
said was
sorry,
pretty
man.
good though, right? Well, I said some good stuff. You know what I mean? You know what I mean?
I hope so. I
I
hope
hope
so.
so.
That's for you to judge and the audience.
Even if I did it, I already did it. So it is what it is at this point. But yeah, I fully take your point of well, I commend you for always seeing the benefit of getting better at giving presentations. I wasn't that person.
Mm.
I actively shied away from it. I remember my first job. I was working as a research associate in a lab, and I didn't have to give any presentations at all. And I definitely was not upset about it. All the presentations my boss had to do. So basically, I do a lot of the research, and then I pass it over to him, and he was the one that actually presented it in front of the decision makers. But it was
Yeah.
that second job where I actually had to be the person that was in front of the senior management team giving these presentations. And I had to go through that traumatic event of getting my project canceled to finally realize, you know what? Maybe this is something I should look into. And I definitely did that. I mean, you touched on it a bit in your last answer, but what did you do to get better at giving presentations in front of people?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to my to my job application process and getting better at interviewing. It's getting just doing it more, right? Getting over your initial anxiety, figuring out how to deal with it, and what works for you. I've gotten a lot of advice on that. Breathing is a big thing. A guy said if you breathe in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 5 seconds. Do that a few times. It slows down your rhythm of your heart, and it also calms you down. It helps with the nerves, calms those down as well. I like to be prepared, but not too prepared, because if I'm over prepared, I fixate on the words I want to say, and I get frustrated when they don't come out the way I prepared to. So flexibility on that is a big thing for me personally, allowing myself the room to kind of freestyle a bit as well. But I do have the preparation. I don't like to go over time. I do like interaction. I like a lot dealing with questions. When we get back to the nerves, what works for me and what I've noticed I'm doing is when I get nervous, I start off talking a bit slower. I articulate a bit more to give myself some room for thought and to allow some comfort for myself as well. And then when I'm comfortable, I speak a bit faster. Obviously, depending on the things I want to convey. That's my comfort zone. Starting off slow, figuring out my rhythm, and then going from there. And I mean, then it's just practicing more and more, practicing in front of a smaller audience and a bigger audience. It doesn't go away, the nerves, weirdly enough. I thought the more you do it, they would go away. But man, they're always there. I just figured out a better way to deal with them, and they're always there.
Oh yeah, I firmly believe the nerves are always there, and I've always said that nerves are there because you actually care about the outcome of your presentation and what you're saying. So
Yeah,
they're supposed to be there. If they're not there, then that might be a problem. And I firmly believe that practice is great. And I also take your point that you don't want to over practice to the point where it's you need to say every word, and if you don't, then you get all flustered on the day of the presentation, and then you're spiraling out of control because you missed one word. So I fully believe that you shouldn't try to memorize each word that you have to say. And your
yeah,
point on timing, I think, is a great one too. I mean, God knows how many conferences I've been to, and you look at the agenda, and it's close to lunch, Patrick. So you're saying, okay, 11:45 to 12.
yeah.
I'm gonna be hungry at 12. So, but they said this is gonna be 15 minutes. It's gonna be done at 12. So by the time it's done, then it's time for me to go for lunch. Why is it 12:05, 12:10? This damn presentation still going.
Don't
No,
do that.
I had to leave. I had to leave. I had to leave at 12, man.
Yeah,
You lied. I'm hungry. Now I'm hungry and I'm angry. No,
yep,
I don't want to
yeah.
be.
Just
I
a
don't want to be
negative
either of them.
experience. Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah,
man. How many presentations I've been to like that? People don't practice beforehand, and so the day of the presentation they actually go over time, and it just throws off the whole agenda, and it's just it's annoying, and it's disrespectful to the audience too. So
yeah.
I fully accept your points about all of those things, and they're good ones to make. You know, when I first started giving presentations, I didn't have much of a process. I would just slap slides together and read them and try to get
Hmm.
out of the room as quickly as possible. Wasn't exactly the best plan. But do you have a process for giving your presentations? And if so, what is it?
Process for giving presentations. When it comes to the slides, I think less is more. I want the key values on there, and it depends on what I'm talking about and the level I'm talking about. Like if I want to inspire, I'll tell you a lot of why the things we're doing, we have done, or we are going to do, because I think that's kind of motivational for people. They can stand behind that. They can kind of see that vision that I'm going for. Um, if I want to explain concepts, explain or share my knowledge, it's more on a what level and more on a how level. So it depends on the audience and it depends on my goal within the presentation as well. So first figuring out, okay, what is the goal of my presentation? Is it conveying some information? Is it an update? Am I inspiring? Am I knowledge sharing? Right? Because then I need to kind of tailor my language, tailor the concepts that I put in that presentation towards that as well. And the next one is who's my audience, right? Because that's going to define the language that I use. I can't do any acronyms, any technical acronyms to people that are not technical. It does not make sense. I can use them, I can establish they exist, but I have to elaborate what they mean. Otherwise, I will lose audience. I will lose them. If I see them being lost, I will point something out or I will try and interact with them. I love interacting with the audience because they can give me direct feedback and they can make sure we trend towards a positive outcome. Because the goal usually is for them to take value, something that was in your presentation, take it with them and do whatever they need with it, right? If it's just information and it's going to anchor in kind of their information database, their brain, that's fine. If they take it with them and it inspires them and creates an action they do, that's even better. But yeah, I think defining your goal and defining your audience, those are key things. In the presentation, there's a lot of information you can find online. There's a lot of things you can figure out that work for you. What I love is very visualized presentations. I've had presentations that other people gave, which I thought were awesome. Never tried it, but they only had GIFs, they only had images, no text, and those were very memorable sitting from the audience.
Huh. Well, you know what the gifts do? It well, it's two things. It prevents you as the person in the audience from reading the slides. So you either
Yeah,
have to listen to what the person is saying or ignore them, and hopefully they're interesting enough that you
right.
actually listen to what they have to say. But then it also for the presenter, it eliminates the crutch of them reading the slides. So now they either has to really know their information really well so that they convey it without having to read slides, or they're going to bumble through it because they didn't write down what they wanted to, what they're going to say, and now you're in the audience thinking, I don't want to be here because this person is not presenting all that well. I definitely see the benefit of having gifts and it being memorable because so few people do it. So that's probably smart. And those people have done that because it obviously worked for you because you remembered it. So
For
that's
sure.
the point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You also mentioned, Patrick, the idea of using breathing to allay your nervousness. Could you just
Hmm.
go, I guess, take us through the actual, I guess, breathing exercise that you do?
Yeah. So this was the advice that I got, and I've tried it a bunch of times. It's breathing in 5 seconds and then breathing out 5 seconds, and doing that a few times because it kind of helps calm your nerves. I don't do it that often. I've tried it. Sometimes I feel like it takes a bit too much time. So I talk a bit slower. I articulate and I put more emphasis on the words I'm using. I'm even doing it now. So people might fall asleep because of it, but it helps me relax, right? And when I'm more comfortable, then I can speak with a bit of a faster cadence. But articulating and allowing people to think in the beginning, I think that's what helps calm my nerves at least.
So you're telling me, Patrick, that breathing in and out for 5 seconds each takes too long? My God,
Yeah, man.
I thought I was
Sometimes I
impatient.
gotta go. Yeah, sometimes I gotta go.
Like, damn, like 10 seconds
Yeah,
is too much, man. Like, good God.
uh, yeah,
No, I love it. Okay, that's cool. I'm also mentioned in the intro your podcast, Beyond Coding. What was the
yeah,
motivation for starting the podcast, and what do you hope people get from it?
yeah. So the motivation is really sharing knowledge around whatever it takes to create software, which is super broad, and those are also the topics that are going to reflect that are in the episode. But it's sharing perspectives, sharing experiences, sharing honestly just candid conversations, authentic conversations with people that have gone through a journey. And it can be creating an application, it can be getting to the position they are, it can be their management style or the things they practice more on a day to day. Whatever it is, usually you are involved in some degree with that when you're creating software, right? Because you have a manager, you have people that have different backgrounds, some transition, some have a non-traditional tech career. You're being managed by a product owner, or you have some way of working, maybe agile, maybe scrum. So those are the topics that really come in the podcast as well. A main driver still and always has been is curiosity from my end. So all the topics I select, also the guests I select, are because I'm very curious for their perspective, for their journey, and for their advice as well. I don't give the advice for people to be like, okay, this is what you do. It's more to sharing perspective, right? And people take that with them again, and they do something with it, or they do not do something with it. It's fine either way. Hopefully, it's interesting. That's the big thing.
I take your point about being curious and inviting people onto your podcast that you want to learn more about. And that's the main thing I do with my own podcast too, is just being curious about people, reaching out to them, seeing they'd be willing to be on the podcast. And if they say yes, then we have interesting conversations. And
Yeah,
what's so interesting about that is that when I was a child, I grew up in a home where curiosity wasn't something that was really promoted. It absolutely was do as I say, don't ask no questions. But then
mm.
I'm making up for lost time as an adult, especially
Yeah.
with this podcast, 200 plus episodes in.
Still going
Still
strong.
going, man. Yeah, you
Love
damn
that.
right. Yeah, curiosity all day, every day.
Yeah.
So, one last question I have is for people who are listening or watching, what would be your number one tip to get better at giving presentations?
To get better at giving presentations, I would say try it. And you can do it with a small audience, you can do it with a big audience. I think it's easier with a small audience, but ask for feedback, right? Because you can think of things in your head that you should improve, but the way you come across to an audience, that in the end of the day is what's going to matter, right? Do they hold value in the things you said? Could you have articulated it in a different way? Do they like your slides? Is there too much information? Is there too little information, right? You have your opinion, you have your thoughts, but if your audience says it's good, says it's bad, says you can improve on things, I think that's what you should focus on. And the only way you can get that is by asking feedback, right? I love people that, I mean, I can learn from this as well because I don't always do it. That in the beginning say, I want feedback, honest feedback, because I'm always improving. I'm looking to improve my presentation skills. Anything you can think of, please give the feedback. You don't have to always take that with you and improve, right? If you think it's fine for the level that you have it, if you don't want to focus on that, if that is not the essence, then say thank you for your feedback. Like I'll incorporate it, or maybe you won't. But getting that feedback, receiving that feedback is really step one, I think, in improving whatever you're doing. because you only have one opinion and your audience has many more.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right. It is important to get feedback from others, especially if these are people that you really want to have listen to your presentation, and especially if
Yeah.
you have to present to them again. So you
Right? Yeah, exactly.
like, no, I ain't really feeling what you're saying, man. You're just a hater. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
implement anything that you're talking
Mm.
about. But see you next week for the next meeting.
See you next week. That's hilarious.
I'm gonna do the same thing.
Yeah,
Still gonna hate it.
exactly.
I don't care. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much for being a guest, Patrick. How can people get in touch with you?
Oh man, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn, Patrick Akil. You can find it if you Google it. It's Akil. Might not be the easiest last name. When it comes to the podcast, I think this is my right. Yeah, exactly. Beyond Coding, it's a bit blurry here, but it's Beyond Coding everywhere. You'll find it on your favorite podcast platform and on YouTube. And I don't know when this is going to come out, but I have an episode with Neil as well coming out soon. So
Oh,
that's
yes,
it.
he does. Yes, it was a wonderful experience, and thank you for having me on your podcast as well. Well, everybody, that marks the end of another edition of Teach the Geek interviews. My name is Neil Thompson, founder of Teach the Geek. It's an online platform for science and engineering professionals. Patrick and I did a bit of talking about presenting in front of people and potential tips that you can use to improve your presentations. Well, I have a resource that provides some more tips, and you can get at it at teachthegeek.com/tips. Again, that's teachthegeek.com/tips. That marks the end of this interview. Thanks again for tuning in. And thank you, Patrick.
Thank you as well, Neil. It was a lot of fun, actually.
I'm glad you liked it.